Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. I've always liked to tell about the time my granddaughter, then around 4 years old, visited me during a city council meeting. After a few minutes watching from the back of the chamber, she looked at me and she said, "Ronnie, what is going on around here?" Of course, then I wondered that too. Today, I can't wait to ask Vincent Montalbano, a scholar of politics and government, as well as a columnist for the Staten Island Advance, the same question. Vinny, what is going on around here today?
Well, I think we are about to experience, if the polls are correct, which I hope they're not, some kind of epidemic of amnesia. That's the only way I can explain what's going on the federal level, on state levels all over the place. We just seem to be forgetting who got us into this mess, why we got into this mess, who's trying to get us out of this mess. And it seems as if we don't remember why we voted the way we did 2 years ago.
The last time you were on this program was just after, I think, Obama was elected.
That's correct.
And we were so filled with enthusiasm and hope, and felt it wasn't even more hope. We were so pleased with the outcome of this. And now I can't remember a time that has been as vicious and really nasty and just so straightforward. How much of it, I mean, I hate to ask this question, but how much of it is race originally?
I think it's a combination of many, many things. And certainly...
we're now talking about Obama.
Right, I understand. And certainly I think race is a factor. But I wouldn't talk about it just in terms of, even when I say race, that it's just purely race. I think it's fear. I think it is fear of some unknown. I think a lot of the things that we hear coming out of the Tea Party and out of the conservative movement is a great deal of fear about people who, they're not familiar with, who say different things, who have different names, et cetera, and who move in different directions than we're used to. It's very complicated, and I've tried to write about this a number of times. Part of it is the fact that people have suffered a lot during this recession. And even though the Democrats have done a lot, not only have they been blocked by the Republicans, but because, we're Democrats, Ronnie, and I will criticize the Democratic Party when I think it's necessary, because they themselves did not move quickly enough on things, or directly enough on things, firmly enough on things. People are confused about what's going on.
But we haven't had, this administration has accomplished an enormous amount.
Yes, they have.
And they're getting no credit for it at all.
That's correct.
And what propelled the Republicans from the very beginning to say they were not going to cooperate at all? What started that original thing?
Well, this is not, this should not be unfamiliar to us, because during the Clinton administration, Republicans did the same thing, only then they seized on personal deficiencies. And here they don't have that, so they use other kinds of things to get people scared and riled up.
I can't remember such misinterpretation of things, so deliberately misleading the public about so many things. And that, going along with the behavior, the way they've acted there, I'm at a loss. And then why so many people believe it. That's the other thing. I think that ties into what's happened to them in the recession.
But here's the question that I suppose will be answered on Election Day. Clearly there are a lot of people who believe it. The question is, when we say so many people, do we know what that really means?
Right.
All right? There are a lot of people who are standing off on the sidelines. Those are the people that need to be motivated to come back out to vote, and I think that's what the president is trying to do, albeit it's a little late in the process, okay? Right. But the folks who are always the most motivated are the folks who feel things the strongest, whether it's in a positive or a negative way, and I think that's part of what's happening. I think the other part of what's happening is that clearly, and this I think is a good thing from my perspective, the Democratic Party and the Democratic members, leadership in Congress, and the president were trying to rectify what brought us into this recession by bringing us back to a state that a lot of vested interests don't want to go back to. Okay, we have, we have an unregulated capitalist system, and I find capitalism can work very well when it's regulated, and when it's unregulated, we see what happens. He has been stronger and stronger on this. Didn't start out that way necessarily, but it's been stronger and stronger on this. He's become, I would consider him to be truly a populist. That is going to get people with vested interest very, very, very upset. Add to that some practical things that happen, like the Citizens United case that the Supreme Court affirmed, which, for people who may not realize what we're talking about, basically they've said that corporations who were, by the way, given rights as individuals back in the 1800s, it's not just from this court, okay, that they have a right to spend money freely and without any kind of restriction, and the Congress, being frozen as it is, wasn't able to put any restrictions on that. So it's a complicated situation, but it is a very serious situation. It's a serious situation for our democracy, because we cannot have that kind of unregulated spending of huge amounts of money by people who are not individuals, no
and
matter what the cause is.
We don't even know who they are.
Exactly.
And what their motivations are. There's a whole interesting thing about ethanol and who those people are with those commercials that are going on in an organization. You don't know who's contributing to these terrible, misleading ads.
People who have power, Ronnie, don't want to give it up. All right. And the group that was eliminated from power 2 years ago, or somewhat anyway, don't want to give it up, and the Republicans have become the vessel for that, and a very willing vessel for that.
It's interesting. I think the Tea Party people aren't they supposed to be basically middle class?
Well,
you know, they're...
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I think that certainly the activists are not rural poor, or the
urban poor.
People who might have some grievances that would be pretty legitimate. The thing I always refer back to is a Tea Party rally where a woman held up a sign that said, "Get your government hands off my Medicare," and I almost fell out of my chair, because it's like, well, but the government's hands are what? Of
course. Don't take my Social Security away, and don't take my Medicare away, and stay out of my life, right? Yeah.
But they're confused.
And it comes at a time also where we've got this whole fundamentalist attitude. I mean, where we're questioning, we had how many Republican candidates to be president who didn't believe in evolution? Almost all.
There were certainly more than I would have thought.
So it's a crazy time of thinking. Where does it come? And that preceded Obama. So
it did precede Obama, and even when he was running, I used to have these conversations with friends and with my wife, and we used to say, it's like pushing things into a funnel. I mean, this was such a dramatic change that people got more and more agitated. But I really think we have to keep it in perspective. There are people who are agitated about this, and then there are a lot of people who are in the middle, who are just viewing it and trying to figure out what to do. And to that group of people, the Democratic Party has really not done enough and I don't mean enough in terms of accomplishing things, but in terms of communicating things. Even now, the great publicists and strategists in the Democratic Party are going after the Tea Party candidates on personal things. Who's a witch, who's not a witch, et cetera, et cetera. Let's talk about what their supposed ideas are, because when those things get on the table, when you really know that they want to talk about eliminating Social Security, when you really know the candidate in Alaska used government benefits, which he was entitled to, and now wants to eliminate them for somebody else, and actually said, well, at that time we were in need. Okay, well, so are other people.
I don't think it's really necessarily, I mean, I was talking about this with another guest, that as the parties become less influential in our lives.
Yes.
So we talked about Howard Dean with the meetups, and he organized his campaign more or less out, and they're still meeting up. And then the Obama campaign, which was really out of the mainstream Democrats, because most of them really endorsed Hillary in the primary, that you diminish those, you've got all these new groups coming out that have amassed some power, but they're outside of the realm of politics.
Well, that's true, and that needs to be regulated. Yeah. And that's part of what the problem is.
But also, don't you think part of it is the media coverage and basically cable television?
Oh, I think the media coverage is definitely part of the problem, and not just cable television. Just this morning, I switched between all 3 network morning programs. And after they did a piece, their usual daily piece during the elections about the polls and this and that, each of them had on a Republican to challenge that and no Democrat to rebut that. Each of those 3 stations had that. And that is a tremendous problem because that's the point of view you get then.
Right.
You see the poll and you get analysis from the Republican side.
And you get the need, with the cable at least, to fill the time because they're on so long.
Well,
they have to have something to talk about.
The 24-hour news cycle.
So that's
is
why you
contributing
get the minutia of I'm a witch or all this other stuff. That's what
but
gets
the media
picked up.
hardly ever covers things substantively.
No more, especially no more. Right. The newspapers, nobody.
Look, they're absolutely a part of it. There are a lot of pieces to this. Something as simple but as complex as the filibuster rule in the Senate has contributed to this. I mean, it's an absurd rule to begin with, but then when you actually don't force people to filibuster, okay, and you just say, okay, somebody says they're going to filibuster and you pull back on things, that's what creates or helps to create, I think, among the population at large, this idea that things are dysfunctional and neither party, or certainly not the party that they just put in, which is the Democrats, are trying to solve that problem. So it's I'm not sure what the end result is. I'm not sure what the answer is, but it's a stew. It's a very toxic stew of very difficult things that are creating these problems.
It's the leadership in the White House, and especially starting with the healthcare stuff. They were criticized for holding back. And I always felt that they deliberately held back because the Clinton administration was criticized for not consulting. And so you were waiting for Congress to do something, but Congress didn't do something, as you said, until they were really pushed. And part of it then is the leadership in the Senate, I guess. I mean, the House, I mean, poor Nancy Pelosi has become the symbol of everything wrong. Involved in that, I think, is a good deal of sexism. Here's an assertive, aggressive woman, and boy, we don't want her around. And the same with a black in the White House. We don't want him around. So it's a very touchy and subtle kind of thing.
Well, certainly politically, the Senate is the more difficult body. At least at this point in time, that may change after the election. Pelosi ran a good House. The Senate rules are very arcane, as we talked about with the filibuster. And so you get the compromises you get. And again, this is where the general public, the general electorate, gets very frustrated when you're telling them you're going to do something, and what comes out at the other end is full of holes, like a piece of Swiss cheese. On the healthcare thing, this is my take on it, and I think we talked about this last time I was here. On balance, I would have done one other thing, and I think it would have made it a lot easier, and that would have been the public option. And in fact, it's been shown that where there is a public option, like with Medicare, where government does negotiating for you, things turn out well. But we don't have that. But for me, the issue was not only that, but the fact that I thought they did it out of order. My feeling was, after they did the bailout, so-called bailout, okay, when they got to the stimulus, they filled it up, and this is part of the problem with working with a legislature that's not very strong and with special interests that are allowed to spend a lot of money. When they got to the stimulus part of it, they did not create enough jobs. Mm-hmm. I would have said, go back to the Roosevelt days, set up a WPA or a PWA similar to that, but where he did rural electrification, TVA, what we could have done, and what we, I think, still can do, is deal with alternative energy and stuff like that.
And transportation and the alternative.
But we would have created jobs. People would have had jobs. They would have seen an actual, definable, recognizable advancement in their
So what we landed up doing was saving a lot of jobs.
Well, I think, look, there were good things. We saved jobs.
We did a lot.
And we extended unemployment benefits.
And we did road work and stuff that did create
They did tremendous amounts of things. When critiquing them is not criticizing them, but they did a tremendous amount of things. But they were good strategists. They chose a strategy. Perhaps that lent itself to what's going on now.
Well, what do you talk about these campaigns where people are saying such outlandish things? I mean, I have never seen candidates, party candidates, I mean, people who won primaries, who are so so out of it. Where is that? What do you think our whole tradition of elections? I mean, you're not as old as I am, but you've come through. You know the New Deal or and you know the Kennedy era and all and that kind of stuff, and Lyndon Johnson. Did Watergate so affect us and make us so cynical? The general population, did it take out so much from the concept of the public good or something that we don't have? What's happened in the air?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's actually a good analysis of it. I think it's more than that, but certainly Watergate is one. I would go back further. I would say, starting with the assassination of President Kennedy, that people became very skeptical about participation, and cynical about participation in government, and certainly it's not linear, I'm sure, but it has trended for less participation in elections since that point in time. But there's two other things I would say to you.
It's also for fewer heroes in the legislative body.
That's true, and part of that, I believe, is the absolute, pandemic of money that's involved in politics. And the only real way to solve that problem is to break the connection between money and government, money and politics. We certainly are not there. We're nowhere near there. Even here in New York State, and we're in pretty good shape comparatively. I believe you can make a $50,000 donation to a statewide official. $50,000, Ronnie, it's a lot of money, okay? It's a lot of money.
Yeah, but it wasn't, Palladino didn't get in because of somebody else's money.
No, I understand.
And O'Connell and Sharon.
I understand that, but although that's a fact of it, the other part of it is now this unregulated money. Right. And the fact that people can choose who they want to support in a variety of different ways. But the money, the amount of money we're going to spend in this election cycle is in the multi-billions of dollars. Right. That's pretty bizarre when you think about it. I mean, even though it's a national race.
Are people running because of the interest in these special interests, or are they running because they really want to?
Well, I think.
I think we've not mentioned the wars, and the more I think about it, how some of the people who voted to go into Iraq voted is totally unbelievable to me, and we let them get away with it.
Well, poll after poll shows that the American people are very dissatisfied with Afghanistan. I think the president is trying to get us out of there in his own deliberative way. Certainly, pulling what we've pulled out of Iraq, I think people are very
But it wasn't only Bush who got us into Iraq. It was a Congress.
It was a Congress that got us into it.
It was the Senate who let him do this. And where were they? Why didn't they stand up? They were afraid. Now, is it because when you run for elected office, you've got this career ladder that everybody else they want to move up? I mean, it would be interesting to compare the times, but I guess in the old days, I'm trying to think of some of the famous senators. They were there for a long time.
Well, but you just said before, and I think you were observing something that's right about this, is that the parties, nationally, statewide, locally, parties have lost a lot of their clout. In this election cycle, the Tea Party people particularly were elected over party candidates supported by the parties. The parties have lost that over the course of time. Again, I believe because the government institutions, the Senate, the House, the state legislatures, deal directly with the interests, and that is because they can lobby, they can make contributions, they can do all kinds of things that were not that way at the time that you're talking about, back certainly in the 60s and even into the early 70s. There are so many factors. We went through 2 terms of Reagan, the first Bush and then the subsequent Bush, being told that government is the problem, being told that government is the enemy. We have a whole generation of people, young people, who have grown up being told that government is a bad thing, not a good thing. That has got to have an effect on you after a while if you view it that way. The 2008 election was hopeful, and I still hold hope. I still don't believe that we're going to have this massive bout of amnesia and people are going to come to their senses. But it is a struggle against a message that historically now for 30 years has been the message that's out there, the biggest message that's out there. Government is not the problem, but that's what we're being told.
Well, but increasingly people are the problem. I mean, look at what's going on now with in the gay and lesbian community. Palladino being proud of what he said. All the discussion about don't ask, don't tell. All of the messages that come from the levels of government that you would expect are people of stature and leadership are telling us that there's something wrong with this, even though from the ground up it seemed to me there was much more acceptance of different ways of life and letting people do whatever they want. But you have a kid who kills himself, you have this terrible crime in Bronx, because we're feeding it all the time with our bigger policies. Where does this anger and stuff come from? I mean, you've got that church in the Middle West who was in Brooklyn yesterday. I wish I had been there. They were there saying the Jews killed Christ, about 6 of them.
This is a phenomenon. I'm not sure that I can explain it, but I can certainly agree with you on it. It's a phenomenon in America. It's a phenomenon around the world. You know, fundamentalism is something that's on the rise. I would have never believed it when I was a young person.
We didn't even mention the mosques and all that stuff.
No, but again, it is being fed. It is being fed by a media that needs to have stories all the time, but it's being exploited by a class of wealthy people who want power and are smart enough to understand that if they can keep the pot boiling, that they're going to be able to keep the power that they want. But it's dangerous for democracy, and we have to work at, and we have to hope for the fact that the larger element of the population, which is not this group, okay, but a larger element of the population that that may be skeptical or confused or whatever, we can get to, we can educate, we can make sure they understand.
We are such a failure, aren't we, with educating?
Well, you mean generally?
It's beginning to be overwhelming. You represent child care workers, and where have we advanced in the last 20 years? I mean, now they're closing child care centers, and we're not. Then we have the whole problem of education. What are the best? Who is educating our kids, and what can we do to really do a better job? I mean, it's endless because it all feeds into then how do you look at an election? I mean, you have to know something to make an assessment.
You have to be an educated voter, right?
Now we have uneducated candidates, it seems to me. Is it only because I disagree with them that I think they're not smart enough to hold public office?
No, I wouldn't say that. If you're asking me, I wouldn't say that. Maybe somebody else would say that, but I don't think that's the case. I mean, certainly many of these candidates that have been focused on, Sharon Angles, the Christine O'Donnells, the Millers up in Alaska, are saying things that are rather bizarre. And that's why, Ronnie, I don't know what's going to happen 3 weeks from now. I'll be interested to see. I mean, I think some of them are going to succeed, but some of I think they're going to succeed more because people are staying away than that people are going. Certainly, there's an animated and energized group of people on that side. There are some on our side, and there's a great deal of folks in the middle. I don't want to be Pollyanna-ish, okay, because I do this for a living and I've seen a lot of hard times, but I also don't want to despair either. And I think that whatever happens, we have got to talk to people straight out about the issues. We can't succumb to trying to do, we always try and do what the other side does. Well, we're trying to be a little less Republican, a little more this, a little less that.
We're electing people who are losing courage.
Well, we are.
And who don't have a clear-cut ideology that they really think makes sense, and they're going to stick to it. That's why we got into
one of the things I've been impressed with over the last couple of weeks has been the courage of some people running for Congress who are not blue dogs necessarily, or not conservatives that are weakening, but folks, Democrats who are strong about their opinions, still support the president, are defending that. That's giving me encouragement.
I agree with you.
As opposed
And
to
I'm not
discouragement.
pessimistic. I don't think we're going to lose the Senate, and I'm hopeful we're not going to lose the House. So I do have that basic inherent thing, but I am dismayed at the world. I have just never seen such things happening. I just, it's just.
Well, this
maybe I'm wrong.
indeed is a big test.
Yeah.
Because if in fact people don't come out and the folks that are energized do manage to send people in who control the House and the Senate, the president's going to have a lonely time, and folks who did not participate are going to have to realize the consequences of their actions. Now, what happens in the meantime until they come to their senses, I don't
can't
know.
let the program go without talking about Afghanistan and Iraq. Here we have a president that we know really wants to get out of there, but we have no movement on the ground to help him get out of there. I think that he's there because of what he was afraid of what would be said about him, and that he might not have gotten elected if he said we should get out of Iraq and Afghanistan right away. I mean, he went in moderate ways. But where are people who are saying there are kids dying every day, and all of our money is going to this war effort with corrupt politicians and in countries that we can't have any effect on anyway? So why haven't we organized about that?
You mean like we did in the 60s during the Vietnam War?
Where's the spirit? That's what I'm saying. There's a spirit missing, and I guess it's a gradual evolution of what went on in the country.
There's probably a variety of things there, and I think people, I think the folks on the left, or the folks who would do that kind of protest, did a lot of that. Yeah. Not only under Bush, but during the election.
Right. And now they're criticizing.
Well, now they're criticizing, but I think now they also may feel, although they should feel it and still act on it, that we have a president who at least wants to do that. Yeah. But I would agree with you. I think he could actually much more directly make this decision.
He's going to pull it out, I think. I have great faith in him. We're coming to the end of our half hour. I don't want to leave it on a pessimistic note. We didn't even talk about the internet and what that's affecting the world, so we'll have to come back and talk about it more.
Topics.
Because I think that's a pretty important thing to feature in with what we're talking about.
I agree.
It's more of this impersonal communication and stuff.
I agree.
All right, Vinny, so you think that we're going to keep the Senate? The Democrats?
Do think we're going to keep both houses.
Good.
I hope I'm right.
Very good. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Ronnie.
If there are any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore, please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.